We're always telling your stories, and it's time someone tells ours. We're humans first, journalists second. We chose this career to give you a voice. Now we're voicing ours. It's true, journalism has much room for improvement, but not all hope is lost, and we want your trust back by humanizing one journalist at a time. We're sharing with you what we go through to bring you the news. The pain, the tears, the trauma, and the mental health struggles. It's painful, and sometimes we even work 2 jobs to make ends meet. But we all have something in common: the passion, the joy, and the love we feel for storytelling and holding the powerful accountable. That includes holding ourselves accountable. So here are stories from us. This is how we want to help improve the news industry. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo. Hi everyone, welcome back to The Awakened Journalist and our special project Media Healers. We are now on to our 3rd season of Media Healers, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Daniela Garrido. She's a creative storyteller. She graduated with a bachelor's in broadcast journalism from the University of Florida, and she began her career in the news industry in Bakersfield, California, which is a market size 125 according to the Nielsen DMA's ranking. Daniela left the news industry after 22 months of working for a TV station with a salary of $35,000 a year. This wasn't enough to pay for groceries or minor mishaps, according to Daniela. And we'll go into detail a little bit about that in the interview. The average rent price in Bakersfield, California, just so everyone has some context and background, is around $1,294 monthly. And if Daniela spent around 25% of her salary's monthly net income, she could afford a mid-range apartment between $600 to $800. So this would be a rent price that would better allow her to have enough cash left for expenses, debts, and savings, as well as the mishaps. So without further ado, welcome Daniela, and thank you so much for agreeing to tell me your story.
Of course. Thank you so much, Emiliana, for having me. I'm just so excited to speak to you and tell my story. And I love your mission with this podcast. Like when I heard media healers, I was like, that just speaks to my soul. I'm excited to, be a part of that. That sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's start with your story and how you decided to become a journalist, when you knew, because I know you told me over the phone before we coordinated the interview that you knew from a very young age that you wanted to be a journalist.
Yeah. So growing up, my parents loved watching the news. Like they were the kind of parents that tuned in like first thing in the morning. We were watching Univision, we were watching Telemundo. And so when I was, I think in like middle school, maybe elementary school, I was already doing the morning announcements. I was like raising my hand. I'm like, I want to, say anything. Like I was ready to present. And then when I got to high school, I took it more seriously, started learning a little bit more about video editing and the other side of being a journalist and telling people's stories. And then I was fortunate to get into the University of Florida, which had a great news program. A lot of great reporters had come out of there and gone on to big markets. So I knew that this was going to be a great opportunity for me to just grow my craft even more. And of course, when I got there, I realized like being a news reporter is not like as glamorous as it seemed when I was doing the morning announcements. So finding those stories and learning from my peers and learning from my teachers, what it takes to tell someone's story was definitely eye-opening. But then when I was ready to graduate, I kind of took some time off and I took a step back and I was like, is this the industry for me? And it was hard, you do 4 years of college and then to tell yourself or to tell your parent, like, I'm not sure if this was meant for me because I was already struggling in college, like hauling my camera with me, like getting in people's faces and asking questions. Like those were already kind of difficult for me. I wasn't like, they wasn't very natural to me. So I told my mom, like, can I just take some time off? I took 8 months off after college to just reflect and see, what did I want to do? And at the end of the day, I did decide like I had good content. I had a great reel that I had put together. And if I didn't try, I was never going to know, you know? So I was like, even if it's 2-year contract, if it's a 1-year contract, a 3-year contract, like, let me just give it one shot. And if I like, I'm not tied to anything. If I want to leave the industry, I can leave. And that's how I went into it. So I was fortunate enough, like the very week that I put my reel on YouTube, I got a call from a news director in Bakersfield, which I had never heard of Bakersfield. I had friends that were going to like Tallahassee, they were going to Fort Myers. Because I'm from Florida, I'm from Miami. So those were like markets that were more exciting to me, but I was like, Bakersfield, like where is that? And she explained it was like 2-hour drive from LA in California. And she was like, I previously was a news director in at KTLA, which was a huge station in LA. I think they're the number one station in LA. And she was like, I'm really excited to like mentor you. I've gotten great reporters here to this market. And I'm like, I would love to help you grow. So I was like, great. I'll think about it. And of course, we negotiated the salary, and there wasn't much negotiation. I ended up taking a 35K 2-year contract as a morning news reporter. And that's where it all began.
Okay, I love it. So from a very young age, you kind of just knew and had it in you. Um, and then how was it for you landing that first job? Was it, when you were signing the contract, what were the feelings that came up for you? Was it everything you had ever dreamed of, or was it kind of disappointment to see like, well, I'm going to be making $35,000, which once you start breaking it down, like you mentioned over the phone, wasn't nearly enough to make a good and decent living.
Yeah. So the 35K was definitely eye-opening, and I think you always hear in the news industry, you got to pay your dues, and this is everyone's like starting salary. So I took it, but I think my biggest worry was that I was so far from home. I think it is one thing to be a 3-hour drive from home versus a 5-hour flight from home, and taking a lower salary when it's just you on your own at 22 years old was terrifying. And I definitely had moments like I had an old car, right? And I couldn't afford a new car. And it was always breaking down. And I had to call my parents every time and be like, can you please send me money? Like there was just no way that I was going to be able to pay for a new air vent in my car or new tires. Those kind of things were scary for me. And there were definitely weeks where I mismanaged my money and I couldn't like get groceries, or I was like, okay, what's the cheapest thing I can get here that'll last me 2 weeks?
Yeah. And you also mentioned like you were living with a roommate because it wasn't even, enough to be able to make it on your own.
Right. So I didn't know anyone in Bakersfield, and I did move in with a roommate who again I like had not met. So those are just kind of like all the risks that you take when you're starting your first job in the industry. And I was paying 650, I believe. It could have been 625, which at the time made a huge difference. And it was a decent apartment, but Bakersfield has a huge crime rate, and so for example, my apartment building didn't have any fencing, didn't have any security. I was waking up at 2 in the morning and I was walking to my car for work. So those are things that I definitely could have used some extra security, but that would have cost me so much more.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit because you had a morning shift, which is not easy. Anyone in news industry knows
Mhm.
that those morning newscasts at 6 a.m. means you have to wake up at 2 a.m., get ready, which takes a toll on your physical, emotional, and mental health. Just because your body
Mhm.
isn't even used to waking up at 2 a.m. in the morning when it's still dark out. Um, and that came for you with a lot of challenges and facing safety concerns. Do you want to speak to me a little bit about the story you told me over the phone as well, with the
Mhm.
safety concern you had leaving your apartment?
Yeah, definitely. So I again would wake up at 2 in the morning, and there was just one morning which was so scary. I was walking to my car, and there just happened to be like a homeless man roaming around the parking lot. And I think he might like, I was in a dress, I'm like, I'm ready for work already. And I would always wear sneakers on my way to the car. And just because I knew I was going to have to be carrying stuff all day, but I was, like, ready for anything and would carry pepper spray with me and check it actually on the wall before I, like, left my apartment every day, like, right outside. And so that very morning, I'm walking out and there was a homeless man in the parking lot, and he kinda, like, called me over, and obviously, I'm like, "It's 2 in the morning, like, I'm not gonna like, talk to anybody who comes up to me." And so I just, like, quickly rushed to my car and, like, the first thing I would do was just, like, lock my door because 'cause I'm like, I feel so much safer if, like, I'm just in a locked car. But definitely having my pepper spray helped me, but after that, I just started getting horrible anxiety, and I didn't realize because I was, first of all, late for work as I always was because it's, like, so hard to get to work at 3 in the morning, but I started getting this anxiety about leaving my house
Mhm.
because I was worried that someone was gonna come up to me, and so that became really hard on me because it's like I would check the windows of my apartment to, like, which looked out to the parking lot to see if anybody was there, just so I could, like, know ahead of time, but it still didn't take the fear away, and, it was scary, like, a lot of times I thought, I need to move, but I couldn't afford it, so I just kinda had to, like, risk it every morning.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that, especially alone. The
Mhm.
fear is completely valid. And I guess a little bit of PTSD too from that encounter, just because you didn't really have family members or like a close niche support system to be there for you,
Right.
physically, like at that moment. And so now, once you encounter that situation, and continued going to the news station at 3 a.m. in the morning for your shifts. How was the work environment once you would arrive at the station, and what did your daily tasks consist of?
Right. So as a news reporter, I would, get to the news station at 3 a.m. I unfortunately was not fortunate enough to have a producer that worked well with me. We just didn't work well together. And I would often reach out to my colleagues from college and ask, like, does your morning news reporter, I mean, producer, have stories ready for you, or like even something that happened overnight, like anything? I was always having to come up with my own stories. And I felt like, it was my first job. I didn't really know what I was doing. Like, I could have definitely used some guidance. So what I would do, because I didn't feel like I was getting guidance, is, reach out to people and find my stories the day before, or 3 days before, schedule them, film them the day before, and I would a lot of times have to either package it, like pre-package it, or and front it, in the studio. But very often they wanted me to go live, which is very scary when you're a morning news reporter because even when it is 6 in the morning, it's dark, depends on the season. And when I didn't always have a photographer. So the way my station worked was we had two morning news reporters, and there was kind of like this competition, like whoever had the better story got the photographer, which in and of itself is like a little toxic and competitive. Not what I wanted to be doing at 3 in the morning was trying to convince someone to come with me on my story. It's I'm already tired. Like I really just want to like get my job done and do it well. So whoever had the better story would get the photographer, and a lot of times I felt like maybe I really did feel like I had the better story, but I still felt like I got the short end of the stick a lot of times. And because it was my first job and I didn't want to offend anybody, I would always just kind of take it. And even if it meant like going to a neighborhood that I didn't feel super comfortable in and just fronting my 2-minute package, which I just didn't feel like it was worth it a lot of times, especially if it wasn't breaking news. I always was like, why can't I just do it from the studio? Why can't I just front this package from the studio? But they just wanted me out there live. So that that like tug and pull of like, I don't feel safe. Can you help me? Like, can you guide me? Like that in and of itself was toxic. And like I mentioned, my producer and I just didn't have the best relationship, unfortunately. And that just grew over time, like um in the 2 years that I was there.
Yeah, no, and it could be so difficult when you don't have that support in your newsroom,
Hmm.
especially from a producer, because the stress of having to prep your own story, reading about it, learning all the details, getting ready to go live on camera, getting to the location where the story is
Hmm.
happening, and as you often had to do to set up your own camera as a multimedia journalist and record yourself, that in itself is so difficult and overwhelming. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that as well. I'm wondering if you ever felt supported by your news director and your managers as well, because I mean, clearly from what
Hmm.
I'm hearing, you
Right.
didn't feel supported by your producer, but did you feel that from upper management?
So while I was there, there was a lot of changes in upper management, which you don't see often, especially in news directors, but it just happened to be while I was there, we had changes. And I wasn't as close to my second news director as I was to my first. That was hard, definitely. Like I kind of felt like even if I did come with a concern, it was going to be like, okay, and that was it. Like nothing. I'll work on it. We'll talk about it.
Mhm.
Nothing like that, like no action items. And toward the end, we did get an assistant news director that I felt like, she was Latina like me. And that is very important to have like diversity in newsrooms because we are we all handle things differently, and a lot of times it is based on our background and the way we grew up and the way we were raised. And it is really nice to have someone in upper management who understands where you're coming from and like why this is so important, why this concern is so important to you. And I felt very close to her toward the end, but she was only there for the last like 4 months that I was there, and she was really disappointed when I chose to leave because she wanted to keep me, but she understood that the environment that I had already been in for almost 2 years had really torn me.
Wow. And can you go into detail as to what some of those concerns were? Like maybe a concern that you brought up to upper management and you felt went unaddressed?
Right? So, like one concern I did not bring this up to upper management, and I
Yeah.
wish I had, but I think it all comes down to being young and afraid. And so I did have like a horrible encounter with my producer where like the topic of immigration came up.
Mm.
And as I mentioned to you in our call, my parents both immigrated to the United States from Venezuela. And I find pride in that. I have so much pride in that, like, and the fact that they were able to see that, um, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago now, and see that vision of the United States was important to me. It's something I hold very close to me. And he basically was like, "Aren't you an immigrant?" to me, which no, I'm not. Like, I was born in Miami in the United States. And I felt like, aren't like, where's your family from? Like, I'd like to know a little bit more about you since you obviously want to know about me. And he was like, no, I'm from California. My parents are from California. My parents' parents are from California. And that was something that I just never let go of because I was just a little like, do you feel entitled because of that? Like, that's how I felt, and I wish I had brought it up. I never did, but I think that that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. That was already toward the end, and I just felt like no one's going to listen to me even if I say something, and I don't want my relationship with my producer to be strained even more. So I let it go, but it's not like I ever forgot about it. I still to this day think about it, and I that's why I bring it up now.
Do you feel like the tone in which he asked if you were an immigrant, if it was like condescending or like trying to minimize you because of your background and ethnicity?
It felt that way at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know what his intentions were, but at the time it did feel that way, and I had heard other, not racial, but like ethical unethical things come out of him. Um, so I wouldn't put it past if that was his, intention, but like I said, like, I don't know his intention, and I didn't feel supported there, in that, when we were talking about that.
Okay. Gotcha.
And nobody in the newsroom, like, really stood up at the time and was like and, like, said anything, but, we were in a group of people, but I think it all comes down to, like, when like, all of us were young there, and nobody wants to be the one to say something.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate and it's so sad because it's so common in newsrooms when we're young. I know that was my case as well. I was young
Mhm.
and I used to not speak out often on injustices or just feelings of lack of support or situations where upper management was negligent within that newsroom. And I think that when we first go into the industry, we all are very fearful of speaking out because we don't want to lose
Mhm.
our jobs, because
Of course.
sayings like you got to pay your dues or don't burn bridges or just do what you're told and say yes to everything if you want to move up the ladder. And I think it's up to us to cancel that type of language and empower ourselves to speak up for ourselves, because it is the very same right that we are constantly trying to protect in our stories. We try to
Mhm.
empower others to tell their truth and
Right.
to honor that freedom of speech. And we are so afraid to do it.
Mhm.
And it's so unfortunate and it's so sad, because it comes down to situations like yours where young journalists are quitting after 1 year or 22
Mhm.
months or 2 years of being in the news industry, because we're
Right.
so, I guess, like, what's the word I'm thinking about it in Spanish, like desilusionados by
Yeah,
it.
like, disillusioned, like, just thinking
Yes,
of, yeah.
like so disappointed by the industry
Mhm.
once we make it inside.
Right,
um
yeah, and it's sad because it's such a beautiful profession, like,
mhm.
I love telling people stories, I still love it, and, I would have stayed in it if I felt, like, safer, emotionally and physically, because I do think you need to take care of your journalists. We deal with a lot, we see a lot, we experience things way deeper than the average viewer because we're there, we're feet on the ground, hearing people's heartbreak and some of the worst days of their life. Of course, also some of the best days of their lives, but it's you take it home with you. At least anyone I'm very emotional. I brought everything home with me. There were times where I definitely cried, like, I didn't even realize how much it hurt me until I was home,
Yeah.
and I would just think about my day and sob. It was everything, the fact that at, like, 3 in the morning, I was, like, waking up or, like, 2 in the morning, I was waking up. Like, then I was, like, fighting with my producer at 3 AM, and then at 4 AM, I was trying to find a live spot and, like, a live shot spot, and then, I was interviewing someone with a horrible story at 6 AM, and then all of that, like, emotion sticks with you throughout your day, and then you get home at the end of the day and you just, like, let it all out, but you can't do that every day, and it's not to say that that's gonna be the same story every day, but, it's even 3 times a week, like, is hard to feel so drained.
Yeah, and I think that's the word, feeling so drained, having so many emotional ups and downs and not having the support system within newsrooms to learn how
Mhm.
to cope with the trauma that we go through as
Definitely.
journalists.
Mhm.
Because telling people's difficult stories, as hard as it is, and then to have to deal with lack of support within the newsroom,
Mhm.
you know, it it's even more challenging.
Right.
Um, so I want to ask you a few more things, but before I ask you about, your love and your passion for journalism, I want to ask you a little bit about another great point that you just made.
Mhm.
Coming home and taking those emotions with you, your mental health, your physical health. Um, how was that for you with the morning shift and with all the challenges you were dealing with within that newsroom? And
Yeah, so I actually
experience
sorry.
no, sorry, but maybe an experience that really like hit you and
Mhm.
really challenged you.
Right. So I don't think I realized how tired I was and how much I had ignored until I left the industry. And I was like, wow, like this is what peace feels like. I had forgotten. But I really realized in myself, well, I think it like, and I do want to stress this. I was 22 and I was, you know, like, right out of college. I was not taking the best care of myself, I wanted to meet new people in Bakersfield, and I was, like, still going to dinner, at 6 PM when I should have been sleeping. So I do wanna be, like, super honest about that, and I wish that I knew better, but, I didn't, and I was going to bed late, and to be waking up at 2 in the morning, you should be asleep by, like, 4 PM, but I was asleep at maybe 10 PM, like 11 PM sometimes. I don't even go to bed that late now. So it's just to say, like, I was not putting my body first, and I was sleeping 4 hours. A lot of times I was sent out to the rain by myself, like, no cameraman. I was just, like, soaking wet trying to set up my camera, like, get in front of the camera, like, the lighting, trying to figure everything out in, like, horrible rain or, like, snow. I mean, the snow is easier, but the rain was, like, horrible. And I, like, a mix of, like, 4 hours of sleep, getting soaked in rain, still having to report for the rest of the day, so you're, like, wet. Um, you can get sick so easily. Your immune system is already low and you're kind of knocking it down while it's already down. And I remember just like feeling so sick. I'm like, I can't come to work. And I mean, that was like just unacceptable to be like, oh, now you can't come to work because you were in the rain yesterday. And you're like, I mean, yeah, like, I know that sounds very hard to believe, but I don't, I sleep 4 hours every night and you put me in rain and my body's just not going to react well. And, not to say that that's everybody. I know some people can push through it more than others. I definitely couldn't. And I felt like physically that was a huge toll on me, and then mentally, I didn't realize how bad I was reacting to things because I couldn't sleep well, because I was so stressed, because I never had time for yoga. I never had time, to, like, do anything, besides sleep and work, and even when I did sleep, it was like a nap in the middle of the day and then 4 hours at night, So I was reacting to everything. Anything that someone would tell me, I was just, like, reacting so aggressively toward them, and I feel horrible when I realize now, like, now that I'm able to sleep
Mhm.
8 hours and prioritize myself, I realize, like, I was not me. I was a different person, and I wish I had been me, 'cause maybe I would have done my job better.
I love your honesty. I love your transparency, and I love everything you're saying because I resonate with it so much. I understand you so much, and I'm sure so many other journalists will as well. And just to touch on several things that you said. One, the industry is so demanding,
Mhm.
and you just said, if you put my body in rain, it's not going to react well, and maybe some people can push through it more than others, but I
Mhm.
applaud you for speaking up and saying, hey, I can't go to work tomorrow, because that takes courage. And because we
Mhm.
don't have to push through anything as journalists or as human beings. If we feel like we're pushing through a job, it, our body is physically and mentally and emotionally telling us that is not the route to take. So
Mhm.
for one, I applaud you for your courage,
Thank you.
for speaking up and saying, listen, today I need a break and I need to take off work. And I think we need to do that more often. And I think journalists who are still in the industry need to do that more often and say, my
Right.
mental health is not there. I need to take a break and just don't
Mhm.
push through anything. Please do not feel, if journalists are listening to this and they're still in the news
Yeah,
industry, you do not have to push through anything. Another great
definitely.
point that you made was, the going out to dinners,
Mhm.
and not fully taking care of your body. So I think that falls back again on the industry is so demanding and draining that morning
Yeah.
shifts are so difficult, and there needs to be a work and life balance. And
Mhm.
it is unfortunate that for you to be able to find that balance, it took a toll on your physical body and your mental and emotional health. But I mean, we can't just live and breathe work.
Mhm.
So I think that whoever is still in the industry and is feeling those feelings that you were feeling at that point and trying to balance between, I really want to go out to dinner, but I really have to go to sleep by 4 p.m. because if not, waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning is going to be so difficult. Um,
Right.
Speak up. Honestly, speak up
Mhm.
because we need to find that work and personal life balance. Um,
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you for recognizing all of that now and for being at a place where you remember what having inner peace feels like.
Right.
Because if
Mhm.
that's not in the industry, then something's definitely wrong and something's gotta change if you're not feeling at peace with your work, with your job, and if you are feeling like you're constantly having to push through work.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm in a much better place now, but I also feel if I went back to news now, I would do it so much different, and I would put myself first, even if it meant not living my l like, I don't wanna say not living my life, but, like, not going out and, all of that stuff, like, I would have done it differently. I definitely would have prioritized my sleep. I think without sleep, you're not useful for yourself or for anybody else, and I think if anybody takes anything from this, it's, like, sleep, especially if you're on that morning shift, like and I understand the want to, wanna meet people in a new city where you're a stranger, and you definitely wanna build your community, you wanna make friends, um, and you're unfortunately, not everyone is available at noon, when you're available, when you get off your morning shift,
Yeah.
so that was, like, really hard for me, and I was like, "Do you guys wanna hang out at 3 p.m.?" They're like, "I'm at work." You know? So that was always, like, really funny and one of the things that would get me in trouble and not get me to sleep on time, but, I would do it so much different and, yoga or, like, stress like, some way to get your stress out of you because it is a very stressful, um, and demanding and physical job, and it is important to, like, take care of our bodies in order to be able to do our job.
I agree. I agree. Okay, so let's go a little bit into detail about what you love about journalism and a story or a situation or something that really touched your heart while you were in the news industry.
Man, so many. Like, I still think about, like, everybody that I interviewed. I think my favorite thing about journalism is everyone has a story, like, every single person, and being able to share stories of triumph, of, like, overcoming, even of sadness and fear, like, it helps the viewer, the person on the other end, empathize with the world, and be like, "I'm not alone." Maybe they went through that, maybe they know someone that went through that, maybe they've never ever met anyone that went through what the story that you're telling, and they now know someone because you told that person's story so well, and I think that that was important to me, especially in Bakersfield, we had a big farming community, And I, being from Miami, have never encountered like farmers. I know that sounds so like
Yeah,
weird.
no
They're
farmers
the
in
ones.
Brickell City Center.
Yeah, no, none. And so I was like, it's crazy to think that this is what puts these are the people that put our food on the table to like live,
Mhm.
And there was this huge emphasis on what exactly like farm to table meant in Bakersfield. And it was not just something in the farming employee community, but the kids in Bakersfield, the families were really raised to know where their food came from and what it took to bring that food to the table, which I thought was so beautiful, and it was something I was really interested in learning more about. And I was lucky that the morning show was watched by a lot of people in the farming community because they have to be awake so early. So we had that was a big part of our demographic. So I would cover a lot of agriculture news. And it's so funny because it ties into my passions now have become like my health and what's in my food. And I think a lot of that came from my agriculture beat while I was a journalist. And it was something that I remember when they gave to me, I was like, what? Like, can't I do something else? And I ended up loving it. I ended up telling stories of, of different different agriculture, for example, like pistachios, like where do they come from? How are they made? Like who is making these? And I know it's something so small, but we take it for granted. And to be able to tell those people's stories and the hard work that they put into making that food for us is special to me. And it was something that I took with me forever. And I always will tell people about it.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and it's so true. Every time we sit down to eat dinner or breakfast or lunch or, whatever it is, um, we often don't take the time to thank those people that have grown those crops so that we can have food at the table every single day.
Right.
So I love that.
Hmm.
That's an amazing story. All
Yeah,
right.
I love it too. It's a good one.
Yeah. And I love pistachios too. So great story
And
to tell.
actually, just a really funny like story, real
Yeah.
quick. But in Bakersfield's really known for almond production.
Okay.
And you know how in Spanish we say almendra,
Yeah.
almendra. So when I first moved to Bakersfield, I would say almonds. I
Yeah.
think it was because I say almendras. And
Yeah.
so I remember my first almond story, someone emailed in and was like, "Can someone tell her how to pronounce almonds correctly because she's saying it wrong?" And then I realized like there's so many things that you don't realize you pick up from your like bilingual like upbringing. And I just thought it was like really funny. And it's like, and I always say like you are you, and
Yeah.
nobody can take that from you because your experiences are different from everybody else's. And I'm like, that is something I bring to the table. I say almonds, you know?
Yeah.
Like
I
I
love
say it
it.
wrong. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
it's
No,
just
you say it
me.
beautifully with your accent. Yeah, it's you. And it's
Yeah,
Venezuelan and it's Hispanic and it's culture. I love that.
exactly.
That's amazing. Okay. I love
Just a
that.
little
Yeah, and
funny
keep being
story.
you, please. Don't try to be anyone
Yeah.
else. That's so funny. I love that. Okay, so I guess, oh my gosh, I wish I love these interviews because once we like really start connecting and telling these stories,
Right.
it's just so beautiful and it flows. And clearly, we're both so passionate about journalism and storytelling. So
Mhm.
I could stay here for hours, but unfortunately, Instagram only lets me upload 1 hour interviews.
Oh, no
We
worries,
have
because I have
to-
work at 9:30, so we're good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I guess last question. Um, unless you have anything else that you want to add,
Mhm.
what is one thing that you think the news industry needs to improve on? And how could we help the news industry improve?
Right. So I would say hiring photographers again, but I feel like everybody says that, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna address that because there is another thing that I'm very passionate
Actually,
about, and
though,
it's
you're the first person in Media Healers interviews that says it publicly to hire
really
more photogs. Yeah. You're the first person
Oh,
that says that. So that's
interesting.
one thing, but what's the second thing that you want to go into?
Another thing that I would really love to see that I wish I had was more education for the young reporter, like the first time reporter. I know they typically like send you off with like a veteran reporter, maybe someone who's been there like a year, and for like maybe a day, maybe 2 days, and then you're off on your own. But I really wish that there was maybe like a week where news directors, assistant news directors, producers could sit down with like a new hire and be like, this is what we're expecting of you. This is how, like, this is our advice to help you get there, rather than just like throw you into the fire and then you like sink or swim. I think if we could help the new reporter better equip that person, then they're gonna grow. They're only gonna blossom from there. But if we like don't water that person, then they're going to wither. And I think that that's important, and also to like help reporters get to their next market. Like I would have liked to see a little bit more of that, like here's what we think is best for you, like communication between news directors and reporters, and it not being so taboo.
Yeah, especially because they often don't want you moving up the ladder or moving on to the next market because it means you're
Mhm.
leaving that station and they have to train someone new, hire someone new, so many efforts, and there's definitely a lot of upper management that often makes sure you don't advance in your career, or at least
Right.
tries everything possible to keep you
Mhm.
from growing, which is unfortunate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Daniela, this has been so wonderful. You are so
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm so thankful for your time and for you
Of course.
being open about sharing your story. And I wish you all the best, although I know you won't need it because you're already amazing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I loved our conversation, and I hope it helps someone. I hope someone's listening to it on their way to their morning live shot and they're like, I got this. Like, I'm not alone. Like, that's what's
Yes.
important for me.
Yes, exactly. Like, guys, you're not alone. We're here for you. Journalists are speaking out, so don't
Yeah,
ever feel alone because I think we've felt that already long enough, and it's time that we start telling each other stories so we can help each other out and create a stronger community and stronger support between us.
definitely. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course, thank you. Have a great one.
You too.
Journalists, this one's for you, to help you heal, to help you understand your worth, and to help you know you're not alone. So share the love and subscribe to Spotify and YouTube and follow us on Instagram. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo.